Warwickshire folk will recognise their emblem there because our postcard today is from their county town of Warwick. We're in Lord Leicester's hospital. I think the only word I can use to describe where we are today is sensational, because it is very unique. I don't think I've seen anything like it apart from a little row of timbered houses in Tewkesbury, down the road from here in Gloucestershire. Where are we and why is it so special, Dermot?
We're now in the Lord Leicester Hospital in Warwick, and the reason it's so special is because it's one of the very few remaining timbered communities left, not only in this town but I think probably in the country. It's called a hospital, but it has no medical function. It never has had any medical function. This place provides and has provided hospitality since 1571, originally for old soldiers and now for members of all three services having retired from the Army, Navy and the Air Force.
So was it actually built in the 1500s?
No, it wasn't. Most of it was built in the late 14th century, around and about the 12th century west gate into Warwick. That's the gate from Stratford. And the chapel was built by the Earl of Warwick in the late 14th century, the Great Hall, which is the banqueting hall, this courtyard and the surrounding buildings, built for the guilds of Warwick to hold their meetings here, and for the priests who said the daily services in the chapel. They lived here and said their services in the chapel.
So why did they choose Warwick? Warwick, was it an important town at that time?
Originally it was built here because the Earl of Warwick wanted a chapel very conveniently so that he could have daily services said for the souls of his family, particularly his parents.
A chantry chapel.
A chantry chapel, exactly. And of course the guilds of Warwick were an organisation peculiar to Warwick, just as the guilds of any other town were. And so this little community sprang up here. But the Earl of Leicester found it almost by accident. He had been given Kenilworth Castle by Queen Elizabeth I. He was, of course, her favourite and her master of horse, and he'd invited the Queen to Kenilworth to stay with him. And it's thought round about that time he must have expressed his wish to find somewhere for his old soldiers to live when they were too disabled to fight or too old to fight. Nobody else seemed to care about them, and he thought it might be good for the Queen's image and no doubt his if he set up a home or a hospital. And she gave him her support, and he got on his horse and rode the 4 miles down the road to Warwick. And there is considerable evidence to suggest that he'd done his homework and he knew what he was looking for. And he explained to the town burgesses that the Queen was supporting him in his quest to set up a hospital, and perhaps these buildings at the bottom of High Street in Warwick might suit his purpose.
Now, has that High Street changed much? It's very busy, a lot of traffic coming from Stratford.
Yes.
Has there been much of a change? Has this always been the main street past here?
Yes, it has always been the main street. This end hasn't changed much at all. But in 1694 there was a disastrous fire in Warwick which started just across the road from here. Fortunately for us, the prevailing westerly winds blew the flames up the high street, and so instead of a medieval high street we now have a medieval bottomed high street and a Georgian rest of the high street after the houses were rebuilt.
Did the Earl of Leicester, Robert Dudley, Robin as Elizabeth I called him, did he leave provision in his will?
Yes, he did leave provision, quite a lot of provision for us. I mean, he left it with estates and land, bringing in an income of £200 a year, which in those days was a lot of money. And we then, because of him, own large parts of the parishes of Knowle and Solihull. Now, sadly, we no longer own them, otherwise we wouldn't need to open to the public. But we now only own the land on which the hospital stands, and we have a small financial endowment which nowhere near meets the cost of upkeep of this place. So we open to the public, and we're delighted to do that, to show to anybody who cares to come and have a look what a wonderful heritage we have here.
Now, tourists round the building, starting from where we are, obviously the courtyard.
This is the courtyard, yes, I suppose you could say the recreation area, but it's a wonderful example of a galleried medieval courtyard, and there can't be many of these left in the country. and we're very popular with film and television companies for location work for various historical films and series. Off the courtyard we have the old Brethren's Kitchen, which is now a restaurant.
Is that something to do with the Quakers, Brethren?
No, the Quakers is across the road.
Right.
The founder, Robert Dudley, referred to the residents, the old soldiers, as brothers of the Brethren, and he asked that they be known as the Brethren, and they still are to this day.
So that's where the Brethren...
And that was originally their communal dining hall or kitchen. Nowadays they live in self-contained flats and look after themselves, and so that's now a little restaurant. So there's that off the courtyard, my house behind me.
Oh, you live here too?
I have to live here by Act of Parliament, yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Is that back to Queen Elizabeth?
Yes, it is, from the Charter of 1571.
You've arrived. I'm so glad, because there is something very exciting here. This is the Brethren's Kitchen. We're at the back of it, which is why there's all these bits and bats around. But look at this engraving. Around about 150 years old, but just to show that nothing has changed. No photographs in those days, of course, so it's an engraving that first of all shows us one of the brothers. He's just popping off, looks like he's got his tea or something, because he's leaving the kitchen. But here we have King James I's sixth chair, which is now upstairs in the museum, and that's there where this is now, Mrs. Mop's little chair. This fabulous wardrobe, which is at the back of the kitchen, and reputed to have been given by Queen Elizabeth I to Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, her favourite. That's there, and it's there in the engraving. And we've even got little pieces of embroidery that Robert Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, is said to have sewed, and that's down there, and it's also in the engraving. And as the brother is opening up the door, which is behind you now, you can see the other door, a big wrought iron thing with big squares, and looks like a little bit of a portcullis. And even this detail of a kind of mosque minaret type thing, which is behind that door. Also, this is fantastic because things haven't changed. There is a catch on the windows, very ornate, which is still there. And what else can I see? Oh, and finally, a fragment of Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester's will. That is there in the engraving, and it's on that back wall too. Isn't that just brilliant? So if somebody came along here, what other places could they see? They could wander around here. You have the Chantry Chapel, of course, still.
Chantry Chapel, the Great Hall, the Brethren's Kitchen, and probably my favourite room in the whole hospital is the Guildhall, which is a wonderful timber-framed hall, which is where the guilds used to meet, with the original table still there. They sat around, and off that is the Chaplain's Dining Hall, which contains the Regimental Museum of the Queen's Own Hussars, who were a locally recruited regiment headquartered in Warwick.
And how do you get here? Supposing I was sort of approaching the right years, what would the right years be? How old would I have to be to apply?
Well, funnily, there is no age limit, upper or lower.
And the criterion?
Well, the criteria, first of all, the major criteria is you must have served in one of the three services, Army, Navy or Air Force. And secondly, you must have a pension of some sort, either a disability pension, a service pension or an old age pension. To be little sort of more or less financially solvent. And then you just write to me or telephone to me, and you take it from there, and I will explain how we live here, a little bit about the history, how you would be expected to behave while you're here, and the duties to be carried out here. We live here and have lived here since 1571 under a list of rules that Robert Dudley laid down. Now, it's not very easy to live in the 21st century by 16th century rules, so we try and live by the spirit. For instance, Robert Dudley said the brethren were not allowed to keep hawks, Well, nobody's asked me to keep a hawk
Does
here.
that mean budgies are out?
No, budgies are allowed. I might draw a line at hawks, I don't know. He said the brethren are not allowed out all night without the permission of the master. Well, I don't want them knocking on my door at 10 o'clock saying, please can I stay out all night? So they come and go as they please. He said, oh, it's a useful one, the brethren are not allowed to give blow or stripe to the master. So if tempers get a bit heated in an argument, I quote that one to them and step back.
They can't wallop you.
And the one I love is that he said they're not allowed to entertain ladies under the age of 70 years in their rooms. Well, far be it from me to say how old was that lady I saw you with last night. So their guests are their business and not mine. And we live very happily here. There is one rule that Robert Dudley laid down we still follow to the letter. He required the master to take the brethren to morning prayers in the chapel each weekday morning, and we still do that. Sundays is optional church up in the town here, but 9:30 every morning we gather in the chapel and we have morning prayers following the format laid down by Robert Dudley. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes, and of course the great thing is that we all get together and I can see that the brothers are fit and well, and we talk over the business of the day. And I said this afternoon Russell Grant's going to come and talk to us and run the eye over us. And so it's we don't live by any regimental or military disciplined organisation. We're a community living together, and our main task really, apart from keeping the shelter over our heads, is to look after this wonderful piece of heritage.
The word duel is much overused, but I think we can use it here, can't we?
I think we can.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.